one of the biggest events.
This is the world's most famous seagull
It's so important to so many people.
at this moment in time. And there'll be nothing that can compete with that. And if smoke comes out of that chimney now, then that seagull will excel and be a superstar. Unfortunately, it didn't work out like that, but we'll have to see. Let's see if we can cop lucky for 5 minutes.
Give a meaningless quote with regards to birds. I don't know. Right. It's not going to happen, is it? We've talked so much about this conclave and the history and, you know, what this all means, but I don't think we've really touched on one aspect of the new pope, which I think some people might be interested in, and that's the name of the new pope. So let's say that we get the white smoke in the next few minutes, hint, hint, and we get a new pope, Habemus Papam. The name that man chooses is one of the first things that a pope decides. Do you think they go in there with the name in mind already?
Well, they may not go in with the name in mind, but they will be aware when they're moving towards the 2/3. As we were saying earlier, they're all keeping tabs on the numbers. Francis recalled
Pope Trump.
He knew, as he put it, was
Pope Trump, bad pun.
I think he said it was over lunch. Now, at that point, he probably was about 50 votes, so he was some way short. But just the direction it was moving in, he knew he was going to be elected. So, yeah, he had time.
Pope Donaldo.
To think about
interrupt us.
I can.
It's almost like they think they can make it happen through their applause. It's just people are applauding because they think.
Sorry, you'll have to excuse me. I can't help it. You just chose an ideal spot for a really good, well-timed meeting, you see. I wonder who his artist was. I knew I've named that painting anyway. You have to look at my channel if you want to know what that painting is called. I named that painting what he released.
So let's talk about names. Pope Francis then decided on Francis in that moment during the conclave.
The story he tells is that a cardinal who is very close to Franciscan, Brazilian cardinal, whispered in his ear in the Sistine Chapel, "Don't forget the poor." And when he said that, the word Francis, the name Francis, began to resonate. He said in his heart. Yeah, the name is important. You signal. It's really the very first thing you do as Pope. The name that you choose sends a message. Just so you know, by the way, when a Pope is elected, when he reaches the 2/3, the Cardinal Bishop is running the conclave, as we know, is Cardinal Parolin in this case, assuming it's not him, by the way. He goes over to the Cardinal who has been elected and says, "Do you accept your election?" And if he says yes, and one assumes he will, then the question is, and what name do you take for yourself? And that's when he gives the name. And then there's a gap between that and when the Pope actually comes out on the balcony. And when the Pope comes out on the balcony, we hear, and this is the first we will hear, is the famous words pronounced by the Cardinal Protodeacon, who will be Lamberti, Cardinal Lamberti, French Cardinal. And he says the famous words, "Annuncio vobis gaudium magnum." I have a news of great joy. Habemus Papam. We have a Pope. And then he gives the name in Latin, and this is why it's sometimes quite hard to make out who it is, because the names are in Latin. So Jorge Mario Bergoglio became Giorgio Mario Bergoglio. And then that's followed by another Latin phrase, qui nomen, I've forgotten it exactly, but who has taken the name. There's this little moment, and then he says the name, and there's always a reaction from the crowd at the name, because the name gives out a message. Absolutely.
And just looking back at a little bit of history, because I love history, I'm sure people watching this do, the name originally in those first popes was actually just the given name. So if you're called Matthew, you were Pope Matthew. But it was Pope John II in 533 AD who changed his actual name to Pope John II, despite not being called John. And the reason for this was because his actual name was Mercurius, which he thought was too much like the pagan god, the Roman god, Mercury. And then in the 10th century, taking on a name became commonplace. And do you know what the most popular name for a pope is? I know you do.
John.
John, the most popular name for a pope. How many Johns have there been?
23.
23. Only 44, this is like a quiz night, there's no prize for you, Austin, apart from more time with me.
Just embarrassment if I get it wrong.
Not at all. Only 44 names have been used once, including Francis. We have had 15 Gregorys, 16 Benedicts, and I think we've had 13 Leos.
Yes, 13 Leo. Leo the 13th in the late 19th century was the last Leo. Leo, of course, means lion. It was a very popular name in the Middle Ages for the medieval popes. Look, since the Second Vatican Council, which took place in the 1960s, the names have really often had an attachment to the two popes of the Second Vatican Council, John the 23rd and Paul the 6th. That's why the two popes that followed, John Paul the First,
I'm filming this
in a sense, combined
to make sure that seagull becomes the world's most famous seagull.
And Francis again has broken with that. One of the ideas I've heard that
Because it obviously hangs out there all the time and sits down a lot. You're probably standing there thinking, what is this thing? Not normally hear that, but what is it? So its curiosity has brought it there. That's why I'm publicising it. So that's why it's becoming world famous. If we get some smoke, it'll be even better. I'm not taking a pure religion. I'm not against religion at all.
The trends begun by Benedict and Francis is to break with that mold. Francis was an extremely daring choice because there had never been a Francis, and of course he was naming himself after St. Francis of Assisi. And I remember somebody saying at the time that, boy, that's a heck of a name to take. You know, he'd better walk the walk and talk the talk. That's a lot to live up to. But I think Francis did very quickly.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Austin. I'll let you sit down and take a bit of a rest while I bring in Joel Rollo Costa, Professor of Medieval History at the University of Rhode Island and Fellow of the Medieval Academy of America, who joins me from Rhode Island. Joel, it's so lovely of you to join us. Thank you so much. And I just want to ask you...
I'll leave that and do the pigeon instead, do this seagull instead.